Good afternoon, everyone. On today's episode of the Week in Cybersecurity, we have a small approach that's slightly different. I'm going to ask Dan to take away the introduction of the founders.
Oh,
Go ahead,
thanks,
Dan.
Albert. So, today we're here with Mr. Albert Well of It's Safe and Tom Albert of Measured Risk. And I figured we'd take a brief break from our normal news feed of cybersecurity information and talk a little bit about startups and fundraising and business development um, for It's Safe and Measured Risk. And hopefully the audience can get a little bit of value out of that and
Well, it all
showcase.
ties into cybersecurity and what we're doing to protect the national critical infrastructure as well as small to global businesses worldwide.
Right on. Yeah, exactly, Albert. Exactly. And so my screen's stuck on your face actually. But anyways, so yeah, so I know that both you guys, you're right, It's Safe, Measured Risk, have been actively fundraising or have fundraised, whether that be from venture capital or friends and family or angel investors, et cetera. And so I figured it'd be cool just to learn a little bit more about that journey that you guys went through and, share stories, share different perspectives. Albert, I know you're at a little different stage in your company than Tom, and I think it'd be really cool just to learn a little bit more about that. So
Absolutely. Who do you want to go first?
I don't know, we could flip a coin or Tom can go first, or we can just have a conversation. It's
Let's just
Yeah.
have a
Uh,
conversation.
yeah, right. That's what I figured.
Albert, how much do you like raising capital?
Oh, I love it. It's a passion of mine. Only
Yeah.
second, third, no, last place next to protecting people.
It's awesome. Yeah, it's a journey. They always say that to be an entrepreneur, you really don't find out. You might have a great idea in life, but until you really get into it and start to raise capital, then you see what the entrepreneurship is about. But yeah, it's an ongoing journey. It's something you never stop doing as a founder. It's not something that you can take your eye off the ball on. And what's interesting about it is, from my experiences, is that there's a breadth of different types of investors that you work with, and we have all kinds hit us on a constant basis. So it's basically anywhere from angels, VCs, private equity firms, all kinds of platforms, and even generalists investors, I would say, folks that have maybe no necessary thesis behind their investment, except that they're looking for emerging companies or emerging tech companies, let's say. But then you also have investors that have really granular focus and knowledge in specific markets. And what's refreshing is when you meet these individuals and they're able to talk with you about the space that you're in knowledgeably and actually really have deep understanding of the differentiation you may bring to the table without you even necessarily mentioning it in some ways. And I always find those conversations really, really poignant. And then the other thing I'd say is that when I look at investors and how kind of we have a lot of dialogue with investors on an ongoing basis, I always find it really interesting when you meet the investors who understand the entrepreneurial journey. Maybe in some cases they were operators themselves. And I always really respect and appreciate that because working with people that have run a business, built a business is a lot different than going to college, for instance, getting a degree in finance and then becoming an investor. That's not, it doesn't necessarily translate to reality. And so from my experience, I like working with people that have had to cross, so to speak, the chasm several times. And so that's been kind of my experience raising capital.
Well,
And how much money? Sorry, Albert. You want to go? Or I was just gonna say,
go
how
ahead.
much money have you raised, Tom?
We've raised over $2 million as a company, and we're looking to raise another 2.7 this year, actually, is the plan. Yep.
Wow. So how long did it take you to raise $2 million?
Several years. So over the course of several years, we've raised that. And it's interesting because they always say, don't ever raise too little. Well, there's two sides to this story. Some will tell you raises the minimum amount necessary that you need. But
Right.
then on the other side of that coin, others will tell you, hey, look, take the check. You don't know if you're going to need it. And in reality, you want that money to last you 2 to 3 years. And so, there's a lot of different kind of varying opinions around size of raise. There's different points in time. I mean, today we have the opportunity to raise up to 10 million through an SEC Reg D that we submitted. And so we have the ability to do that, but I don't think it's appropriate to raise that kind of money. We don't need that kind of money. I think that you guys have seen the issues in Silicon Valley where too many of these startups have raised too much capital and they burn it too fast, and then their longevity is very short. And so we've been kind of prudent in that approach, and I think that's important as a founder.
Right.
Yeah. So I come from a different approach. Um, I have been an entrepreneur for quite a while. My IT security solutions is the first business that I groomed from the beginning to have investors put money into the business itself. And I learned how to do this through Founder Institute. Now, the journey I took, Tom, is much similar to yours before Founder Institute, in that, being an entrepreneur, it's the pathway less traveled, right? Because you're relying on yourself, your wits, your skills, and your ability to get the job done to make sure that you can keep your clients happy as well as make a paycheck. Doing that with investors is a different niche altogether. And working with Founder Institute helped me to understand what makes it different, how to make it special, and how to know who's the time wasters that you have in your investor
The tire
calendar.
kickers.
Yeah.
Right. And what is Founder Institute? Sorry, Albert. Tom.
Founder Institute is a global business accelerator. You join Founder Institute as somebody that wants to be an entrepreneur and you have an idea. And the more formulated your idea is, the easier it is for you to find, I don't know, an exit from the institute to graduate to get your business off the ground.
So it's an accelerator. Yeah.
It is an accelerator. It's a business accelerator, yes. But they also teach you how to pitch to investors, how to talk to investors, what most of them expect and what some others aren't.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, Tom, you didn't do that.
Well, no, I started raising out of the gates. I mean, we started out building products, tech R&D pretty early, but we didn't get the actual product to commercial grade, I guess you could say, for quite some time. So it really, the journey of that was heavily dependent upon actually GPUs. Believe it or not, it had much to do with we could build the algorithms, but we were impeded by the speed of which we could process.
Compute.
Yeah, compute was the issue. But no, our journey was a little different. We got approached by some of the bigs early, and I went through many rounds of investment, due diligence at different points in time to raise different tranches of capital. Now I've probably spoken over the years with maybe 500, 700 investors and had concerted conversations through the years. And it's interesting because I think of where we fit in deep tech, and I would say, Albert, you do too, in that space. When you just think about cyber and the more advanced areas of it, same with AI. I look for deep tech investors that really know what they're doing. So I kind of interview them as much as they're interviewing measured risk. The last thing I want is people that really don't understand the playing field, knowing the competitive landscape and knowing what our business model, how to apply that. For instance, how many people know what a data insights business is? How many investors know what a data insights business is? How many of them know how to monetize it? How many of them know the actual strategic routes to market, those types of things? Those are the type of people that I want to be involved with. And I think that's really what we've looked for through the years. And most of, I wouldn't say that I've gone on the circuit so much and been out daily pursuing investors. I know a lot of entrepreneurs do that. And I'll tell you why. It's better, I have found, at least for us, is to fill up our pipeline of interested prospects of our technology who are going to buy the technology versus hoping that you get, some draw from investors. And the reality is investors, once you have the success on your run rate revenue or your business model, and you show product market fit, then from that point, you have no challenge having investors come to you. And so from my experience, I think spending more time with customers than with investors is a prudent use of time as an entrepreneur.
Totally
Yeah, it's like
agree with you, Tom.
Yeah.
Totally agree with you. Sales solves all problems.
Yeah.
totally, totally. It's like the good old chicken and the egg too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's no doubt, right? It's one begets the other for sure.
Right, right, right. And Albert, you mentioned the Founder Institute, right? So you're also involved with the Founder Institute as a
Yeah.
director, I believe, correct?
Yes, I decided that giving back to the community, the society, is one of the things that I can do. I can offer some of my time, not excruciating a lot of time, but I can also offer my experience in my journey to people that are taking a different one, a different leap of faith for entrepreneurship, and getting them started down the road the right way.
It's so important what you just described, Albert, mentorship and giving back. There's a book called The Go Giver. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that book, but it
Good
makes
book.
me think of what you just said. Um, it's really about the influence or the success in life you have has much more to do with the amount of people you impact in a positive way. And so I love that you're doing that. And yep, exactly. Yeah, that's a great book as well. Certainly.
Yeah,
Yep.
this book really launched my career, especially in writing. That book behind me, hashtag hack 2, is the #1 international best-selling book released in under 12 hours. And Tom Albert is one of my co-authors.
Thanks for having me on there, Albert. I appreciate it. It was such an honor, and what a book you put together too. The people in that book that wrote the chapters, it's phenomenal. I would recommend anybody get out there and buy that book. It's something else. It really is.
Thanks, Tom.
Yep.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. Hey, Albert, speaking of Think and Grow Rich, I always tell people it took me 3 days to read that book, and I didn't even start to begin to understand it for about 5 years.
Well, it's not a book to be read and then put down. It's a book that's supposed to be a how-to that you use almost daily.
Right, right, right. And you're involved in that world too, right? With the Napoleon Hill Institute.
Well, you know all about me. I must be an open book. Yes, I'm a certified coach with the Napoleon Hill Institute. And when I got involved with Think and Grow Rich under Bob Proctor, that's what launched my success more than anything. I mean, who else writes 4 books and publishes them in under 2 years?
Was that Bob Proctor that did that, or
That was
Napoleon
Albert
Hill?
No,
Witt.
I did it.
Oh, you did it. You did. Well,
That's how I got started, though, under Bob Proctor.
Ah, gotcha, 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 gotcha. That makes a lot of sense now. Do you plan on writing any more books?
I have 2 or 3 more that are in the pipeline. Yes.
Wow. And do you think that's helped you as an entrepreneur with like branding or building trust with your audience?
Absolutely, because now they look at it as, wow, this is special. He's got an anthology, which I was told by one of my kids only happens if you're able to put a number at the end of the book title. I said, oh, so hashtag hacked and then hashtag hack 2. Does that
Wait,
qualify
wait,
as an
wait. So what's an
anthology?
anthology? That's a new
It's
word. I've never heard this word.
Anthology is a follow-on, like Star Wars 2,
Ah, gotcha.
things like that, that have uh, the next chapter, but they also have a number in the name.
Ah, learn
So you
something new
know
every
what
day.
edition
Did
it
you know
is.
that, Tom? Did you know about this?
I didn't know it to the level that Albert just described. I know what anthology is, but geez, Albert, I'm
Man.
getting an education today.
Well, I didn't plan it that way. I was shown that I did it, even though they didn't expect it to be done that way.
Interesting.
I'm telling you, Think and Grow Rich.
So I'm
Isn't
just,
the movie out? The
I,
movie's out.
it's
There
been
are
out for a minute.
several movies called Think and Grow Rich or with the theme of Think and Grow Rich. I do believe that Bob Proctor had a movie put together just before he passed in 2022, 23. Yeah.
I keep getting ads in Facebook for the movie. That's why I asked.
It must be listening to your
It's
conversations with
listening to
Albert.
us right now with Albert, and as soon as I go back on, it's gonna have,
It knows everything.
yeah. And then
Yeah.
You
right
So
know,
behind the
it's
post of
funny.
Albert.
It's funny that you let that disturb your social media reality because I don't have the same experience.
Well,
yeah.
Albert, maybe it's already it knows that you've already mastered the book Think and Grow Rich. But I'm gonna to your point right now. I think the best thing to do is I'm gonna stop the phone from actually listening to that. I'm gonna put in my little plug here that it can't hear us anymore, and then we'll see what it comes back with when I get into Facebook now.
Oh, you
Oh
snaky
boy.
dog, you. I only
Yeah,
put it safe inside my network to protect it from undesirable nerwithals.
I love it.
Hey, we're getting ADHD here. Let's circle back to the focus here, fundraising for startups, cybersecurity, and let's talk a little bit about how you guys so I know Tom mentioned, you talked to 500 or 700 different investors. Albert, I know that you've been talking to a couple different investors. I know that Founder Institute has a bunch of investors through there, but what was the process like of identifying the right investors who aligned for you?
Yeah, I think that I found it challenging because even people that were investors in technology didn't understand the product. And therefore, because they couldn't understand what we were doing, they didn't know that it was so blue ocean that it's going to blow up.
Right.
Because
Yeah, it
we're
took me a
taking,
year.
yeah, well, there you go. There's testimonial right there for
Yeah,
you a year.
yeah, it took me a year to understand what It's Safe does and how impactful it is. But once I got it, I was like, aha, nobody else does this. Nobody.
Exactly.
Right, right. And then Tom, how about you for in terms of identifying investors, what was the process like of you sorting through those 500 or 700? I know you mentioned a couple things about like identifying the right strategic fit or
Yeah.
experiential fit. But ultimately you ended up getting $2 million from either one
Oh
investor or
yeah,
a
yeah.
couple investors.
Several. Yeah.
How did you select
Yeah.
those specific ones?
Yeah, what I'd say is let's take it twofold. I mean, we get inbound inquiries from investors all the time. One of the first things I do to pre-qualify that interest, just because of time and honestly respect, is for both parties. Is please send me your thesis, or a lot of them have it on their website, but I need to know whether I'm going to be jumping on the phone with somebody spending an hour and then by the conclusion of it they say that, well, this is their thesis and it doesn't align with our thesis, and that's really important to know up front. And when I was early as an entrepreneur, I wasted a lot of time giving a lot of pitches to people that I shouldn't have been giving pitches to, that weren't qualified, or we weren't in their thesis. And so that's really an important thing as an entrepreneur to keep eyes on, and make sure that you get as much intel coming into that discussion as possible. Otherwise, it can be a bit of a time waste. And so that's one thing. The other thing I'd say for us, it's interesting. We really wear our heart on the sleeves, I'd say. I mean, in the sense that the type of people that have invested in this company, one, share the same value system. They're focused on national security. They're absolutely interested in the future of the country. They're interested in critical issues like supply chain and cyber and AI, and even things like rare earths and all these various different areas that touch the future from a national defense perspective. And then the other side of that is I look for people who have operational experience, as I mentioned. Our largest investor he actually has two businesses that both do over $2 billion a year in revenue. And that's the person who runs that company. And so I look for people that really actually are entrepreneurs, that invest in entrepreneurs. His background also is in data science, which aligns closely with ours, as well as robotics. And so that's the type of investors that I find very interesting for measured risk.
Right. And so you would say, to sum all that up, right, it seems like you're looking for the mission-driven investor.
mission
Right.
driven, knowledgeable in deep tech, and certainly operator centric. Yep.
Gotcha. And then what about you, Albert? What has your
Well, I
process been
learned
like?
something new from Tom, and that was send me your thesis, which I hadn't done before, but I tried to do pre-screening with, you know, finding out what type of investments do the investors really get into. I mean, healthcare is nowhere near cyber, but healthcare needs cyber. They're the biggest
Target.
industry getting attacked. Target. Thank you. That's
Yep.
a great word.
Right. And why is that again, Albert? Just for those that don't know. Why is the healthcare industry the prime cyber target?
Well, there's a number of different reasons. Some of them follows over through what Tom does, which is supply chain. They utilize a lot of new devices that aren't yet fully tested. Their mission is normally driven by doctors who are non-technical, and most
Yep.
people have considered that technology and cybersecurity is an expense instead of an income strategy. I feel that if you have better cybersecurity than your neighbor, that your potential growth is larger than those that are going to get breached.
Right. I mean, I can only imagine what the fines or expenses are for a breach of a major hospital group. I mean, they have to amount to what, millions, if not tens of millions of dollars
They're
easily.
at a minimum of $5 million each, and it depends on the scale and scope of the data. But yes, it
And
is
that
exorbitant.
and that doesn't even account for the trickle down effect of, if somebody say steals my whole you know,
Identity.
identity from the hospital, maybe they get my credit card information. Now they're charging my Amex $100,000 overnight. I didn't know this happened. Now my bank's getting affected, right? And then there's all these other things that happen because of that. So even if the hospital maybe only gets fined $5 million, I mean the total cost of that breach might be what, 50 million, 100 million, who knows, right? I mean, it's really hard to calculate that.
It is, especially if they've been breached once, they're on a list to potentially get breached again because they really haven't changed the
Yeah.
strategy that they're deploying in cybersecurity. Would you agree, Tom?
Yeah, I just read something on LinkedIn that just absolutely what you just said. I mean, I even I was looking at some guidance, some governmental guidance that was out in the public on LinkedIn about the critical infrastructure, and I was reading a deck, and it literally looked like a deck that I had created 20 years ago in the
Hmm.
field, and that's I literally just thought this seems like nothing's
Deja
changed.
vu.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing how some of these companies are still in business, right?
Well,
Yeah.
even cities. I mean, the city of Pittsburgh got breached twice. So did the city of Baltimore. And these aren't small projects. Baltimore replaced all of their IT at
Yeah.
a cost of $27 million. But here's the problem: they didn't change their policies, procedures, or their infrastructure to stop the insider threat, the adversary within, the invisible security problems that they have inherent to their organization.
You make a
Well,
really good point. Sorry, Dan, go ahead.
it's all right. I was just gonna say, isn't the main security point of breach always the party between the keyboard and the seat, right?
You're talking about a PEBCAC. Problem
Talking about
exists between keyboard and chair.
and
Okay.
that's the
I haven't heard
humans,
that in a
right?
while, but that's a good one. Yep.
A
Yeah, go ahead.
PEBCAC,
Yeah.
yeah, that's so generally speaking, and I'm just going to give this out as a free tip. Most penetration tests happen in an environment in a quiet network.
Yeah.
Shh, don't tell anybody. We're going to do a surveillance on our equipment. Get everybody out of the network. Wait, let's do it at midnight because everybody's sleeping.
Oh,
Right.
wait, against this IP range of
Oh yeah, and it's only valid for this IP range.
Yeah,
But if you do more than that, we're going to ignore it.
yeah.
So
Smart
many
on that
of the
one.
crowd-funded security audits that I've done with, I don't know, crowd security programs,
Mhm.
I found more problems inside and outside that I tried to correlate for them and tie it up in a nice little bow. And I keep getting told, well, that's not in scope.
Yeah.
But no attacker ever said, oh, I can't hit this IP address or this dynamic vendor for this client that I'm trying to attack because it's not in scope.
Well, it's such a this is such an important point, Albert. I mean, when we went down the path with measured risk, we started as a pen testing consultancy, and we that's where we were basically cutting our teeth on the cyber side. I mean, we all came from cyber and the background, but um, I found that very odd that because I really got to learn deeply what's involved in penetration testing and at an enterprise level, and then the kind of the absurdity in some respects of it, or the archaic nature of it. And
Definitely archaic.
one of the reasons we started to build measured risk is because we knew that's not sustainable. That's, first of all, a nation state that does reconnaissance on, let's say, third party dependencies. Do you really think that they're doing anything you just described about looking at in scope, or looking at the targeting profile as
No, they want any avenue that they
there's
can
no
get
roles
inside their
whatsoever?
target.
So I think in many ways as a society we've disillusioned ourselves
Yep.
completely by thinking that penetration testing is the
Be all end all.
yeah, it's insanity. It's absolute insanity, especially in a world where, algorithmic warfare is a reality and is being employed today around the world to do reconnaissance, profiling, and attacking. And then really go, you can talk about getting deep into the MITRE, get into the kill chain side of it. And, what you see is that didn't start by somebody having a scope already necessarily that was like predefined with a set of rules that happen to have in a certain hour in condition. The other thing I'd say that you said is really smart that made me think of something that I learned a long time ago in cyber that I just can't get away from still today, which is people, process, and technology. You mentioned Baltimore. Well, you can break apart the cyber problem in people, process, and technology. And it's very much a big four, used to be a big four kind of buzz terminology or framework. But the truth still is that if you just look at people with respect to cyber, processes, and technology, each one of those is its own functioning risk category. And within those, there's a necessity to evaluate every single consideration of all three of those. And so how much of organizations do we do that? Or do we just, here's the question, do we just put buy the most well-known brands in the market and not get in trouble for doing that in a leadership perspective in organizations because everybody else bought that technology, which, as we've seen, translates to massive concentration risk around vendor lock and single vendor dependency. And when that vendor gets breached, then you create a colossal problem. And so those are
That's
things
sort
that
of like what happened with the CrowdStrike thing with Microsoft, right?
yeah, correct. And so, that's in SolarWinds as well. And so how much of it is people, process, and technology? All of it. And then, but what do we do what do we see often when we work with clients? We see that they've not diversified their attack surface risk and their concentration risk by obfuscating certain elements of people, process, and technology. They haven't employed a diverse set of capabilities enough, and they've kind of gone with the standard quid pro, the typical solutions that you hear about that have the largest budgets behind them from a marketing perspective. And that's a real risk that our society faces. And that's not me, Tom Albert, talking as a founder of a company in cyber. That's me saying, look, we need to be realistic with ourselves. Just like pen testing isn't the holy grail, the concentration risk and the way we solve problems in cyber needs to change. Fundamentally, the psychology around it needs to change. The strategy around it needs to change if we're going to be successful.
Absolutely. And, today, just today, Fortinet
Yeah.
was exposed with a 0-day vulnerability and exploit.
What
I
does that
mean,
mean to the layman?
so a 0-day is an unpublished, unknown threat. This has many different understandings. A 0-day can come up with known threats that get modified. Change 3 or 4 bytes, it changes the signature, and now you don't see the attack with today's technology. So if you're using and betting the farm on the technology that's protecting your organization, such as firewalls and virus scanners, which, by the way, are 4% effective, case in point, Fortinet, how are you going to recover? How
You're
are
gonna
you
have to
going to
have
see the threats that you can't see with today's technology?
you need to be able to see around the corner things that aren't created yet, right?
You need to see what's going on inside the network. What's inside your network? Wasn't that a Chase or a Citi Visa card? What's
Yeah.
inside your network?
Yeah.
Well, the same thing happens in cyber. What's inside your network is a great understanding of what is really going on. Because if you can't account for all the packets that are inside your network, you got major problems.
So you're telling me that there's again, thinking as a normal person, not a cybersecurity expert, but so you're telling me that really the only way to know for sure what's going on is to see the traffic coming in and out, and that there's no way to
You can guess. Do you want to guess on your organization's
no,
security?
I don't want to guess at all, but I'm just saying like
The
that's
only
coming
way to do it is continuous monitoring of inbound, they call it ingress, and outbound egress traffic.
right. And then now as an attacker, is there ways that I can mask that traffic so that even if you did see me, like I imagine I have a base, right? Let's just call it Dan's Castle, right?
Whose
And
side
there's
are you working on, Dan? You
I'm just
so here's the problem with compliance. Everybody thinks, well, if we get our compliance strategy together, we'll have governance there that makes us secure. Compliance doesn't make you secure. It gives the attacker the rules of the road on how to engage you. So be careful what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
understood. Yes, I understand.
And
So
it's not just what is happening in your network, it's happening in what your partner's networks are doing as well. It's really important to know all the different business. If you look at going back to the healthcare example, I think 80, I saw a statistic recently by one of the players in our space that said 84% of healthcare providers have suffered a third-party breach this year in 2024. Third-party breach. So
that
if
could be like an
that's
API.
yeah, it could be a software, it could be a software supply chain risk, or it could be a supply chain risk. In other words, just that partner was breached. And by virtue of that partner being breached, well, then there's a high likelihood that you're going to also get breached. And so there's a there's a real necessity to not just know what's in the house, but it's also what's outside in the ecosystem or the orbit or the economy you operate in. And because the truth is that a lot of the attacks are not frontal these days, they're coming through third parties. And if you just do a quick
Right. It could be
analysis,
a trusted business partner
that's
that
right.
you've provisioned with priority access
Yes.
inside your organization.
Yep. And it's a real problem. And then when you get into remote work and you get into environments where, let's say that folks work remotely. Now, this I remember talking about this in 2007. BYOD, bring your own device was the terminology. It's dating me, but anyhow, you know, your house inherently doesn't have the same level necessarily of security mechanisms that you would behind in a
Your
corporation.
employer.
While you're, yeah, an
Or
employer.
Fort Knox, right? Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
different
yeah.
level.
And then yeah, your kids bring things on the network, and man, it's like probably
They
like
don't serve free games, do they?
so you know, all of a sudden, I mean, your attack surface as an organization,
Explodes.
it explodes. It's not just your employees in the moat, you know, the castle with the moat, the corporation. It's now all the employees that are working remotely and everything that's on their networks, and then it's all of the partners that business has access, all the partner relationships that they have access to. And to your point, Dan, API connections and software supply chain connections, all of those represent a component of your attack surface. And most organizations are struggling with this problem greatly. And I would ask that they be, you know, interested in reaching out to folks like Albert and I and others in our network, that we work with some really innovative cybersecurity individuals that are building the next generation capabilities in this domain to protect from the very things we're talking about.
Yeah, and so if somebody did reach out to you guys, you know, would you provide them a consultation, or is there some sort of free analysis that you can do on their network? Like, what does that process look like for
Yeah,
measured
measured
risk and
risk.
for
We could do
ITSAFE?
a free analysis. We offer it today. I mean, basically, what we do is we'll say, hey, you know, we want to understand what your business challenges are. What are you trying to protect? What's your vendor ecosystem look like, or your supply chain? Or if you're a manufacturer, and let's say you're creating, I don't know, you're creating an interesting device of some type, of medical device. What's the bill of materials on your medical device look like? We'll take a snapshot of that and we'll run it through our algorithms, and we'll determine where the attackers are likely to come into your organization. And we'll do that for free. We'll do it for a subcomponent of their entire base. We're happy to do it, and we think it's the right thing to do. And I know, Albert, you know, you have similar capabilities.
Absolutely. I mean, we're ready to come on site in the community that I live in, the greater Pittsburgh area. It's certainly going to be a free office visit, but we'll make it similarly aligned depending on where you are in the country. And normally we can tell in 10 minutes to an hour if we're going to find something in the network. At the worst case, 24 hours. And we have our own tool which allows us to look at activity inside your environment to help you determine whether or not you're at risk, you've been compromised, or if you need some extra help. And I think everybody qualifies in all three.
One of the most amazing things about your technologies, I love that you know, you put the device in someone's network, and let's say it's even in their home environment. Let's say it's the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and you put your device in their environment, and then you can start to see, for instance, whether there's calls being made outbound to nations, other countries, and it tells you exactly which countries those are. That's
Well,
fascinating.
it does. And, you know, the big thing, the big threat with the internet is it's global. The big benefit with the internet is it's global. The problem is you don't know where your connections are going unless you're actually monitoring what's going on. Some of the
Right.
websites that you're using may be located in a foreign country, but their assets, their APIs, and everything, they're trying to get resources from yet another country.
Mm-hmm.
I
And
just
if
want
you don't have eyes on what's going on inside your network, you'll never know.
I just wanted to show you this this company I appreciate because they're very transparent with their sub processors, and I think that this provides a good representation of sort of what you guys were alluding to with the third parties. So this system that we use for transcribing videos, these are all of the at least the ones that they publicly tell you, that all the sub-processors or other softwares that they use to process your data.
So this is their location for their main company. These are all US, except I saw one for Belgium. But that doesn't say what's inside their network as far as resources to get that activity sent out for their clients.
Yeah, right, exactly. But I do, it's like a double-edged sword now that I think about it. I do think it's very nice that they have this trust center for customers, so customers can see how their data is being processed and what parties are processing it. But at the same time, now that I think about it, now the enemy knows where to attack them at. So
Exactly.
Yes.
right. So what's
Yeah.
yeah, so
And
there's
now you start to dig down into the rabbit hole of software supply chain and
Exactly.
the end tier of each of those organizations. Now imagine that each of those organizations did the same that is on here, and you're able to do a knowledge graph to determine out of those companies which are the most vulnerable and what is the entry point. And that is why we built measured risk is specifically. And then on the software supply chain side of it, we also have some good friends in that space that build capabilities as well to look at this very problem outside of just the name of the company or the companies themselves, but actually the connection, the API connection and the security and the lack of security in those connections. Really important.
yeah,
Absolutely.
that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. I know, I think we're running up on time here, gentlemen. Is there anything, topics that you want to cover or news that you want to cover before we
You
call it
know,
a?
I would leave that to the people watching our videos. Why don't you make a suggestion on what you want us to talk about? And we can bring it up on a future show.
Yeah, I think that's a
That
great
sounds,
idea.
yep, that sounds like a great idea, Albert.
Awesome.
Well,
Well,
we're two Alberts, Tom.
Well, that's the truth. It's Albert squared.
It is Albert squared. I always tell everybody that Tom Albert is my brother from another mother.
And the same with Albert Whale, a brother from another mother. So that's where we're squared. Yep.
You guys are a hoot. All right. Well, Albert, if you want to end the recording, I would appreciate it. And thank you everyone for listening.
Until
Thank you.
next time, until we meet again, be safe in your journey online. Don't forget to reach out if you have questions, comments, criticisms, or concerns. We're open. We're always open. Bye for now.